Located 35 miles north of Cincinnati along the banks of the Miami River, sits the city of Middletown, Ohio. There, in the late 1800s, Paul J. Sorg made a name for himself as a tobacco farmer and member of the U.S. House of Representatives for the state of Ohio. His gift to his beloved adopted town was a massive Sorg Opera House and commercial building. A building, it said, he still haunts to this day. Hello and welcome everyone to another wonderful episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. I'm your host, Kat Klockow. Along with me for the ride is Christina Wald and Jen Kohler in the shadows right now. As always, follow us on social media if you please. You can find us at Cin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and please send us your hometown haunts to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. We're waiting to hear from you. We're an official podcast that can be heard on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and SoundCloud. Find us by searching Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, and please rate and review us, and also ring that subscribe button. I think it's a bell icon usually. So other spooky and weird history lovers just like you can find us. The link in the show notes as always. Let's see. Our next issue of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities is almost finished. Hurrah! And you can get a copy of your own this October during our Kickstarter. Also, ladies, it's our 1-year anniversary. Yay! Happy anniversary. Yay! Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. We did it. We made it an entire year. This is a good podcast goal. I'm proud of us.
Hard to believe it's been a year.
I know.
It's been great. A rough year.
So, Kat, that's your and I's anniversary then, because that's when we first met.
Yes, that is true. Hello. Happy friend anniversary, Jen.
Yay! It's kind of an unusual way to meet people too, to start a podcast with someone. It's like it's sort of like Tinder for podcasts or something.
Well, and especially during COVID, because
yes,
we didn't meet each other in person until what, like March, something around there. April.
What was it first? Was it our dollhouse
cemetery
trip?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That was April.
Which has turned out to be a very popular podcast of ours.
That is our most popular podcast.
Understandably so. Although interesting, it's most popular on, like, you aren't seeing the pictures that we took there and stuff. It's like the audio is most popular. So hopefully if you've really enjoyed that one, do watch it because we have lots of footage of them.
Yes. Well, that one was fun because we actually got out of the house and went on a field trip to Indiana to look for these dollhouse headstones. And we even ran into a lovely caretaker who originally approached us to throw us out of the cemetery, but ended up giving us a tour, which was fun.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I hope we get to do. Oh, go on.
No, I was going to say probably the same thing you were. I hope we get to do more field trips for the show.
I was going to say that. Psych. What is it?
No, actually, we're going on one.
Yes, the 25th.
On the 25th, we are going to go to a haunted place that I can't remember.
We'll put it in the show. It's a house, right?
Let me pull it up.
Yeah, pull it up.
And Jen is making the super pouty face.
She'll be on her own journey. She'll be having a fun journey. She doesn't
look happy.
I want to go too. I want to do both.
I know, life's full of unfortunate.
You need to
choices.
learn how to astral project.
Wouldn't that be nice? Or have a clone.
Yeah, but saying stuff like that and actually having it happen is probably much more horrifying. Having a doppelganger.
That would be so fun.
I did not say doppelganger. No. No, not
you
that.
Said clone. You said clone.
I said clone because I can't. Hopefully, I've always kind of thought like if clones were a thing, it would be kind of like a hive mind thing where you're all connected and can like telepathically communicate, so you can all have the same experiences and the same knowledge. Like if one learns about astral projection, everybody would learn it. And
I always one of the best things on cloning was in Calvin and Hobbes, when Calvin cloned himself so that he would have his clones do his chores, and of course, what followed was none of them wanted to do the chores. So,
Right.
they all just wanted to have fun. So I guess when you try to clone yourself to do unpleasant tasks, your clones won't do them either.
Careful what you wish for. Well,
Exactly.
I thought about this when I can't sleep at night. So if I would want to clone for like one to where it would be like all my photography. Then another one would be the one that went to work. Another one would be the one to learn whitewater rafting. And that was like their sole thing. Because there's so many things that I want to do and learn and like really deep dive into, but you just can't because you're one person and I'm old and there's just not enough time in the damn world. So then I don't do anything but sit and watch TV. So I need clones, damn it.
That's a persuasive argument.
Because I want all the knowledge. I want it.
You need like a situation like Groundhog Day.
No.
Well, that's what he did.
Well, I don't want to live the same day over and over.
But he became a really good pianist.
Well, I guess that's true. But you don't want the same day over and over.
How could you share that knowledge?
I have heard that if people really calculated it, like he spent something like 1,000 years in that same day.
Mm-hmm.
And no,
Wow.
I don't want the same day over and over.
No.
So
I
people calculated it. Okay. Yes. Go.
Yeah, I got the information while we were talking about clones. So we will be with our friends Spiritual Realm Paranormal on September 25th as they hunt the Butler County Historical Society's Benny Hoffman House. So tickets are available. You can go find them at their website or their Facebook, which is the Spiritual Realm Paranormal Investigation. So look for it there. I know Christina and I got the VIP tickets. So we get to do everything. We got the full bloody body experience this time, Jen.
I know.
And maybe we'll see your doppelganger because you will have been so jealous of us. You'll astral project a part of yourself and you'll run into me in the bathroom.
If you do see my doppelganger, don't tell me.
I'll take a photo of it and it will be shaky with my phone with a flash.
Jen,
we saw you there. The echo
you
of
were
it.
here.
The
you
echo
of
Jen.
So tangent on the clone thing. Have you seen the show in the TV show and the movie Limitless?
No.
So it's Bradley Cooper. He's in the movie. He somehow gets a pill, and you take this pill, and it allows you to use your brain at 100%.
You already can use your brain at 100%. Sorry.
Don't poke holes in the theory, cat. But it allows you to be like really super like smart. So you can do all these things and figure it's an interesting movie. And then they made a TV show about it. And I want a pill to make me super smart.
So that seems like that, and not to engage in spoilers, but it seems like something like that would have some pretty painful either side effects or fallout.
Oh, yes, of course it does. Yes.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess Flowers for Algernon comes to mind.
Wasn't there a movie called Amy?
Yeah, similar.
Arjo was in that's similar to that too.
Yes, and they all came out around the same time, and then there was another one, and I watched all of them like within a couple weeks of each other. But yes, she was a robot or something.
No. I thought something exploded in her, and then she became like all knowing, and then she could fight. And it started getting matrixy. But I think I have not watched this movie. This is just what I remember from the trailers.
Movie with the person with the big eyes?
Oh, that's funny. No, but it's funny how that's how you remember things visually. Where I always remember the actor's name, but never their character's name.
The one with the CGI, I think that was Battle Angel.
Oh, okay. I couldn't.
Yeah, that's based off of a manga series.
Okay.
And that's actually a pretty decent. The movie wasn't bad. It gave, according to the manga nerds that I know, it gave a pretty good synopsis of like the first few volumes. It didn't go into a deep treatment, but it was a good, enjoyable movie. So if you have like a Saturday night with nothing to do and a bowl of popcorn, it's not bad to watch.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we should talk about today's topic before we digress too much. I mean, we could talk about the new Matrix.
Lucy. Sorry. That was the movie.
Oh yeah,
she
you're right. It
in.
was Lucy, not Amy.
There's a yes, Lucy. Okay, that's the one I was thinking about. Yeah, because they just had a new Matrix trailer come out, and everybody's been.
I haven't
talking
watched
about
it yet. Have you?
Uh-huh.
No.
Okay.
I've watched
Does
it and a couple reactions to it.
Okay. Does it look good? I haven't watched it because I kind of don't want
You
it.
know, the thing with trailers is they all look good. I mean, that's their whole
Yeah.
point. I mean, they always look really interesting and stuff, and they probably it might even be a disservice to movies because they're so good, and then you watch the movie and you're like, oh, you don't
Yes,
think so?
or
Final
they-
Fantasy spirits within. I'm looking at you.
You were
Or
like, I
what
saw everything I needed to see in the trailer.
Right.
Mm.
Or you go and see the movie, and then what you wanted to see that was in the trailer is not in the movie.
That's
I'm
true.
like,
That's
yeah.
true. I mean, so a lot of times, and in the defense, I guess, of the people that cut trailers, they're trying to get you to watch the movie.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't want the movie to look like a dumpster fire. They want to make it look like something interesting. So you really don't know until you go in to see it, how you feel about it.
But I go see movies either if it's something I know, like a book I've read,
Mhm.
or if there's an actor in it that I like.
Mhm.
That's pretty much it.
Yes.
Yeah,
So everyone, the moral
manner
of the
does not
story is to
matter.
go see Shang-Chi and Battle of 10 Rings because it's a really good movie, I hear.
Mhm. But you said
I
you
like
don't want to go
seafood.
see it. Yeah.
So-
I'm not ready for theaters. I'm not.
No, I'm not ready
I
for
can't- yeah.
theaters either, but
Can you watch it on? Can you stream it anywhere?
no.
Nope. Hollywood
It's-
is sticking their feet in.
Well, also, I think, and this is me absolutely not knowing anything, so
Same.
yeah, I think they don't want a repeat of what happened to Black Widow with ScarJo's contract and the PR mess that was. So
Mhm.
going in and renegotiating contracts for streaming probably was more work than Disney was willing to do. So that's why Shang-Chi is in theaters still and not on streaming. So you bet I will be watching it 10 times a day once it goes on to streaming. And I'm buying the Blu-rays, and everyone's getting one for whatever holiday festival they celebrate. So
That sounds
anyway,
funny.
on to
Hmm.
tonight's show. Moving on.
We digress, but that's what we
This
do.
is our
This is a
1 year
podcast.
anniversary.
Yes.
We don't talk about pop culture stuff too often. So
Yes, this is our
Yeah.
indulgence. Isn't
Yeah.
that the first? Like, you have the paper anniversary, the gold anniversary. This is the pop culture anniversary. We give each
pop
other.
culture anniversary.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
So on our 1 year anniversary, we are going to talk about. Are you winking at me, Jed?
No, just making faces to entertain myself.
Okay. I just look over, and there you are, like,
Sorry.
like,
I'm
"Oh,
a little
Jed,
tired.
I didn't know you felt that way.
well, it is the
Come,
1 year anniversary.
Let's snuggle and watch Ghost Brothers. Anyway, all right. So for our 1 year anniversary, we are celebrating with a big topic, which is the famously haunted Sorg Opera House. Now, we talked about this earlier with our friends, Spiritual Realm Paranormal, when we had Amy and Ashley on, because they have ghost hunted is not the right term. Paranormal investigated the location. So I thought we would talk about this, and also it is featured in our most recent comics anthology, the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, issue 2, which will be kickstarting this October. So yeah, let's dig into this. So Middletown is a bustling factory town on the banks of the Miami River. It is known for its paper mills now, but also has been known as a stop for shipping along the Miami River and, of course, bootlegging during Prohibition. The town was formed in 1833. The origin of the city's name is lost to time. Middletown also shows up in fiction and nonfiction, talking about pulp culture again, being the focus of J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of family and culture in crisis, and also the fictional birthplace of Ready Player One's character, James Donovan Halliday, who created the oasis featured in the book series. On a similar note, Paul J. Sorg, who was a very real person, was born in Wheeling, West Virginia, the youngest son of German immigrants Henry and Elizabeth Sorg. He and his family moved to Cincinnati when he was a teenager, and he apprenticed as an iron molder and went to night school. During the Civil War, he fought in the Union Army, and around this time he met John Auer, who was a German-born tobacco roller living in Cincinnati as well. Auer was good with tobacco, with growing tobacco, and Sorg was a really good businessman. So the two of them merged their strengths together and created their own company. Sorg and Auer created the company that manufactured tobacco, and eventually merging with another tobacco company and moving to Middletown in 1869 with the new name Wilson Sorg and Company. Auer and Sorg, however, soon sold their shares of the Wilson Sorg and Company and created a new one called the J Sorg Tobacco Company, which manufactured cut, filler, and plug tobacco. This company would become one of the largest of its type in the world, leading Sorg to become Middletown's first multimillionaire. On July 20th, 1876, he married Middletown local Suzanne Jenny Groover, and Susan and Paul would have two children, Paul Arthur Sorg in 1878 and Ada Groover Sorg in 1882. He completed his 35-room Romanesque mansion for his family in 1888, which is also a famously haunted location in Middletown. In 1891, Sorg had the Sorg Opera House built in downtown Middletown, Ohio. The architect was Cincinnati-based Samuel Hannaford, the same man who designed the Cincinnati Music Hall, Cincinnati Observatory, the Hyde Park Elementary School, and Cincinnati City Hall, just to name a few. Like many large Midwestern opera houses, the Sorg had a long and complex use history. The Sorg Opera House, or what we'll just call the Sorg now, was opened on September 12, 1891 with a performance of The Little Tycoon, composed by Willard Spencer, and with a speech by then Ohio Governor James E. Campbell. The Sorg was grand and had a seating for 1,200 guests with an orchestra level and two balconies, the mezzanine and the upper balcony. I do want to note something here. And this is something that I've noticed with a lot of old opera houses throughout the Midwest that I have visited for different paranormal investigations. The seating for the black guests were limited to the upper balcony. So this would be the area closest to the projectors now when you go into the Sorg Opera House. And it only had hard wooden benches to sit on, and an entrance and exit were separate from those of the other white guests of the theater. This is something that doesn't get pointed out a lot, but I think it's worth a mention. The Midwest was not immune to Jim Crow laws and still altered the way the Black community members got to experience their life in the city. I mentioned this practice because I was honestly, I'm going to curse here, fucking gobsmacked to learn about this when I was working on my first book, Haunted Hoosier Halls, Indiana University. And I went to the Crump Theater, which is in Columbus, Indiana. And the docents there were like, oh, yes. And this is where our Black theater patrons would sit. And I'm like, why the fuck are they all the way up there? Why can't they just sit and see the theater like everyone else? The interesting thing about the Crump is that it also is haunted by a former Black theater goer. And he just sits up in the upper balcony in that particular old opera house. The Sorg does not seem to have a Black theater guest like that, but I wanted to mention that this is a part of history. It did get sort of rectified later in its life, but I wanted to add that as an interesting history fact. All right, back to old history. In 1901, the Sorg began showing early forms of motion pictures, such as photoplays and vaudeville performances before the operas. Many famous vaudeville performers had graced the stage at the Sorg, such as Marie Dressler, Will Rogers, Al Johnson, Bob Hope, and Sophie Tucker. These live shows were discontinued in the late 1920s in favor of the theater becoming a full-time movie theater in 1929. On January 17th, 1931, a fire caused massive damage. Excuse me. On January 17th, 1931, a fire caused massive damage to the backstage area of the theater, which caused the Sorg's closure for several months. In April of 1935, the Golden Theater Company took a long-term lease on the property and began repairs, reopening on September 22nd, 1935, with films and stage shows. A false ceiling was added in the 1940s, separating the upper balcony, which we just talked about, from the rest of the theater to improve the sound. The upper balcony was no longer used, however, so it isn't like they put black theater goers up there and they couldn't see anything. They just didn't use that space anymore unless it was for storage. The Sorg remained a movie theater until the 1970s, when it was closed, like many small Main Street businesses, in favor for malls. Yay. Sad. So sad. Soon after its closure, the Friends of the Sorg was formed to reopen it as a live performance venue, and they were successful and ran the theater until 2010, when a water main break forced the Opera House to close again. In 2012, the Sorg Opera Revitalization Group, also known as Sorg, was formed and bought and reopened the building. Since Sorg purchased the Sorg, a number of improvements have been made, such as removing the partition of the upper balcony, so now you can visit there, and replacing the seats. They actually received the old music hall chairs in 2017, rehanging the house curtains, and it still is a live arts venue where you can go see concerts, and they still do stuff. Even through COVID, they managed to keep doing things. The Sorg reopened in late 2017 with a performance called Celebrate the Sorg and featured the Butler Philharmonic Orchestra. Of course, like many buildings its age and with the history that it has, there are a few ghosts associated with the Sorg. The most notable of which is a guy you may have heard of, Paul J. Sorg. He is by far the most well-known ghost to haunt the halls of the old Opera House. His favorite seat is on the mezzanine level, first row, second seat. He has been witnessed there countless times by both guests and those renovating the space. A woman in red has been witnessed in the dressing rooms backstage. She is rumored to be a former actress who visited during the vaudeville era. She disappears when approached, however, but has been seen there for decades. A shadowy ghost has also been seen ascending and descending the staircase from the backstage dressing rooms up to the actual backstage of the stage, because the dressing rooms are in a basement. Another female ghost has been witnessed around the mezzanine level bathrooms. She has been reportedly not exactly a spirit you want to run into, and is reportedly kind of grouchy and mean, and kind of harasses you when you're in the bathroom. So if you're a lady using those restrooms, prepare to be harassed by unseen spirit. She has also been witnessed by not only patrons of the property, but psychics who have visited the location. One that no one ever needs is a perverted male ghost who roams the entire building, both the commercial and the Opera House, and has been known to stroke ladies' hair and make kissy noises on audio recordings. Jen is giving me the ew, that is disgusting face. He's also heard walking around the buildings really late at night. Those are the most common ghost stories, but I can share my own if you're interested. So Jen surely is. All right. So I am going to have to supply Christina with the old photos of me because I look silly. Anyway, I lost where my place was. All right. So I actually did witness a ghost while I visited the Sorg back in 2013, and it's one that has never been mentioned by any paranormal group or any website, but I went face to face with her, and I do tell the story in the new copy of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities issue 2, which will be kickstarting October 4th, and you can grab a copy then. But I'm also going to retell you the story now as well, because it is an interesting short story. So, as mentioned in that little quick history that I just read, the Sorg Opera House has been revitalized by the Sorg Commission. And it was during this time, right after they had purchased it, they actually opened it up for volunteers from the community to come in and help just take out rotten wood, clean up the place. It was especially the commercial buildings, which still, that I know of, not all of it is used, but the Opera House is, it's really large. It's massive. When you go down Main Street, you cannot miss this. And the front half of it, this pointing towards the street, is actually what's known as the commercial building, because it was rented out to a variety of different businesses since 1891. So you have the ground floor, which has large windows, and I believe they do have those cleaned up and rented now. And then you have floors 2, 3, and 4, and the fourth floor is a really large ballroom. And if you're familiar with dances from these small towns during the early 20th century, this is where a lot of local balls would happen. If you are familiar with the story of Resurrection Mary in Chicago, the character Mary was coming home from a ball from a local establishment similar to the Sorg. And it was common for young kids, the young folks, to go to dance parties on Friday and Saturday nights, or weddings, receptions, anything. My own hometown of South Bend has the Morris Performing Arts Center, and you can have your wedding reception in the ballroom of that old opera house and orchestra theater. So my job was, when I went to go see where I was assigned, was to clean up the fourth floor ballroom. And it just needed to be swept. Rotten wood needed to be taken off. Wood paneling needed to be taken off of the windows so they could replace the windows. They wanted to start painting it at some point. Parts of the floor needed to be replaced. Just the tile and everything. We had to wear masks because since this was built in the 1800s, there was asbestos and you didn't want to risk breathing that in. But I actually was invited to help by fellow paranormal investigator David Jones. Now he's part of the North American Dogman Project and Project Paranormal Investigations. So it was he and I and a group of other investigators went to go help rebuild the Sorg, basically. We were giving back to the community. The building is massive, as I said, and the doorway that went to the commercial building is actually different than the doorway you would use to go to the theater, though you can get to the theater from the commercial building. And it's also different than the black entrance, which is a fire escape on, I think, the west side of the building. That was both the entrance and exit. So I go into the commercial building entrance, and this place is a maze, and I hang a left, and I am greeted with this gigantic stairwell, and it goes up all 4 floors and then has a skylight at the top. And I look at the staircase, and standing halfway up the stairs is easily a older teen, young 20-something lady, dressed head to toe flapper. Like bobbed haircut, black hair, bangs. She had the beaded headdress with a feather, and then she had a white sequined flapper dress with 2 rows of fringe, beaded fringe. The entire thing was beaded. What caught my eye was just the shimmering of all the beads from the light from the skylight. And mind you, this is like 10 in the morning, and I had driven a half an hour from Cincinnati to get there. So I was wide awake and quite within my capacities. Like, I wasn't daydreaming this. She had sheer nylons on, and then black buckled shoes that were like a kitty heel, so maybe 2 inches tall. Very, very ready for dancing. They were scuffed too. And then she had a shawl on that looked really, this one was harder to kind of pin down because it was also kind of looking like it was evaporating at the same time. So it looked like it was kind of like a feathered out like shawl, but also kind of steamy. So when I illustrated them, they're all kind of wispy and steamy because they all look like they were kind of evaporating. She took one look at me. I swear we just locked eyes for a good 10 seconds. And then she just ran up the staircase. And as she ran, she just faded away. And I remember getting up to the ballroom and David was already there. And I just looked at him and I'm like, I already saw a ghost. And he had investigated the Sorg already, I think a year or two prior. And he's just like, oh, yeah, you're going to run into them all the time. They're everywhere. Right now, we're just kind of cleaning. So, I mean, like, no, we couldn't do any audio recording because all you would hear was a sweeping and people coughing and stuff like that. But the entire time I was there, I had to put out of my mind that felt like I was being stared at and watched, which was really freaky. And eventually, like, we got everything cleaned up, and yeah, that in the end of the night, and we left. But the Sorg is an interesting place, and I would definitely go back to do an investigation. So, questions, comments? Come back to me, ladies. Come back.
And we have a hometown haunt actually at the end of this episode from someone who visited the Sorg without any preconceived notions.
Oh, wonderful.
She had never heard of there being any hauntings and knew nothing about it, was invited to go to a fundraiser that a friend was having. And we'll read that later.
Nice.
Yeah, I was interested to hear, also, and I suppose no reason to conceal this. We're working on a Kickstarter video. One thing I think is really interesting about your depiction about this is how clearly you saw this flapper. And is that usual? It seems like when people get an impression of something, and I'm thinking back to when Kevin described seeing the person reading the paper, like when you take in people, usually, like when you walk down the street and see people, you don't remember tiny details about them. And it's so interesting just how clear. Do you think that's part of their projection to you? Like, is there some of that where it's almost like a broadcast where they're trying to get you to see them, if that makes sense?
I don't know how to answer that. So I know I take a lot of mental notes of how people look because I watched way too much Dateline when I was in high school. So I sit there and analyze everyone I'm around and just take details going, in case this person goes off and kills somebody, I want to be able to report this person very easily and accurately. So I kind of also draw them in my head like a cartoon. So that's just me personally. Could they be projecting other people, like to other people, their full body apparition so that they know they're there? Sure, that could be a possibility. So, but mine is too much true crime. And that's why I just pay attention to everything.
Is there ever a case where it's not a ghost, but an entity projecting like a glamour of some kind?
That has been reported, especially doppelgangers can do that. That's one of the theories behind doppelgangers is that they're just projecting. Oh, you got an earthquake there, Jen?
Nope, I just kicked the table. Sorry.
It could be like a glamour of somebody. That may be why they're able to almost nearly perfectly emulate how somebody looks and walks. I know people who are really into demonic possessions and demonic hauntings will very gladly say that, yes, that they're trying to pretend that they're a little girl at the end of a hallway. And once in a while, I have run into entities like the one that we ran into at the farm who will say one thing and then their vibes are giving off something completely different.
They're not reliable narrators.
Yeah. And that's also a thing to remember is that when you are talking to the dead, they aren't reliable narrators. People are the heroes of their own story. So they're going to be the victims of every single thing that happened, even if they perpetrated stuff, which makes the perverted ghost so annoying to run into at the Sorg or any other location because they're like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I just think you're really pretty and I want to stroke your hair. And,
and you're dead and you have a limp dick and, just stop it. Sorry, you may need to cut
now you know. Ashley did say that she has run into ghosts having sex before.
That's true. She did
Yeah.
mention that story.
It makes
But
me think of
that's
that.
with other dead people. Leave the living alone.
It makes me think
Well,
of that
there was a
movie,
woman
High
who said that she
Spirits.
was. Yeah. High Spirits.
Did you ever see it?
Nope.
Yes, I
Oh, it
actually own a
starred
copy of it.
Connie Booth and
Yeah.
it was like one of what's the actor's name? One of his last
Peter
movies.
O'Toole.
Yeah, it was like one of his last movies. But you watch it today and you're like, this is a really rapey movie.
It's
Very.
I
I
like
mean,
Revenge of the Nerds.
Was it Daryl Hannah and Liam Neeson and
Steve Gutenberg.
yeah, Steve Gutenberg when
Okay.
he was still a
Yeah.
thing. You know, he's
Yeah.
kind of an odd choice in that. I mean, in the movie, when you watch it at first, you're like, oh, this is really good. But then when you watch it again, you're like, wow, the story is about. This isn't a spoiler. Is about a guy. It's about a castle in Scotland. Is it Scotland? I can't remember if it's in
Not
Scotland.
sure.
And Peter O'Toole owns this castle, but it's haunted by ghosts. And Daryl Hannah was murdered by her husband, and so they haunt this castle. And it's kind of, I don't want to go further into the story. The woman that was also famous for the movie Vacation is in it, and I can't remember the actress's name.
Beverly
Yes,
D'Angelo.
yes. And it basically becomes a quirky romance because Beverly D'Angelo has an affair with Liam Neeson, and they basically tell Daryl Hannah's character that, oh, well, you know, you just weren't, you know, like almost, I don't want to say victim blaming for being murdered by her own husband, but like I found the conceit of the movie somewhat surprising and probably it's not remembered well. If you know what
I've
I mean.
actually heard of this movie.
Yeah, I mean,
I own a copy of it. If you maybe we should have like a movie night or whatever.
yes,
But I would be more than happy to lend you my DVD. But
yeah, but it
I
does have a
watched it.
leering ghost scene, remember? Because Beverly D'Angelo, is she like in her bra or something? And he's haunting,
Probably.
and he's and the part of the haunting is he's chasing after Daryl Hannah, and he turns and looks at Beverly D'Angelo, is like, wow, you're really hot. And then they end up getting together. It's a really weird movie.
Yeah.
You know, like the fact that Beverly D'Angelo's character is unfazed by the fact that this ghost husband of hers now murdered his wife. And then I mean, I don't want to say too much more because spoilers, but it was a movie that came out, was it the 80s? It came out in the 80s.
Yeah. Late
It's a very 80s film, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Thinking about movies like Pretty Woman and stuff like that. Of course, it's no problem that
Pretty Woman was in the early 90s, goofball.
oh, okay. But still not very woman friendly.
See this face?
Yes,
This is a face of disapproval.
the
So
movie should be disapproved of.
I have thoughts about this. Even like watching movies from like the early 2000s and even like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, let's just say 10 years ago, the whole, like the Me Too movement really brought a lot of things to light, even for like women to, oh, I didn't realize that was a harassment situation I was in back in, you know, when I was in college or whatever. So, and I think the way women were treated as comic foibles or what was funny, like constant rape jokes, how women are less than. And when I watch old movies, I have that lens now. And I'm like, damn it. I know you guys didn't know. I am like, you didn't know any better, but God, it's in everything.
I know. I
Everything.
enjoyed that movie when I first saw it, and now watching it again, I'm like, ouch, this really, oh my gosh. I mean, I can't believe that this is like in a script.
Well, and this week I've been rewatching West Wing, The West Wing, which is a fantastic TV show, but it's even in that. And it just
moral of story, we should all watch reruns of Murder, She Wrote. Anyway.
Exactly. See,
actually,
that's
on my
Untainted.
list. I want to rewatch Murder, She Wrote.
And there's a wonderful YouTube channel that rewatches them for you. And
yes, Pushing Up Roses.
Yes, it's one of my favorite. Would you call it YouTube shows? Actually, it's not a podcast, but
she's very good.
But Angela Langsbury is one of my heroes.
Oh, yes. I love her.
So
again, we got sidetracked.
Yeah, we may want to save that one for the Patreon. Anyway, any questions about The Sorg.
Yes, I mean, it seems like the Langford buildings seem to be fraught with with these things, because it's a person that built Music Hall, right? It was Langford.
Hannaford.
Hannaford, sorry. Why did I say Hannaford? Hannaford designed this building. It seems like a lot of them are fraught with these sorts of things.
Yeah, maybe it's the materials he used.
I don't know. I mean, at least Music Hall had, a lot of burial grounds and stuff. Did the Sorg have similar?
Not that I've ever found. It was on Main Street, but usually you didn't have your cemeteries on Main Street because they're cemeteries, and it wasn't popular to put them on your main drag of your town. I mean, Middletown's always been pretty bustling since even the early 1800s, and is very much a mill town. So I don't think they moved anything. It probably was just old homes, or maybe not a supermarket, but your market or small businesses before. That's a really good question for the historical society there, actually. Maybe we get somebody to chime in. But that's not something I've ever found documentation on.
I would love to visit it. I don't think I've ever seen it.
It is remarkable.
I haven't either.
They've done a lot of very good work restoring the place. A fun little fact is it is rumored that there are tunnels between the Sorg Opera House and the Sorg Mansion.
Oh, interesting.
And the mansion is being refurbished now by a private couple. It used to be apartments. And back easily a decade ago, a few paranormal investigators were getting reports from the people that lived in those apartments that even the house was very haunted.
Is it also a Hannaford?
I want to say yes. I thought it was the same architect.
I mean, he's got a very noticeable style. So
yes,
this makes me want to go up and drive and see it.
Yeah, it's a heavy Romanesque style. 35 rooms. It's huge. I do remember one of the urban legends I heard was that Sorg had built this massive mansion, and then quickly after his wife had died, but that turned out to not be true. She lived rather long into the 20th century, as well as both their kids. So they may be, the urban legend may be I'm going to say cross-contamination with like Lemp Mansion or some other, or Felt Mansion. There's a few large barren mansions that are in cities.
What was the biggest challenge in adapting this story, besides all the architectural heavy drawing?
Oh my. Actually finding an entertaining way to show the reader the history of the ghosts and hauntings. So this one went through several drafts that I had people proofread, and they were bored out of their skull. Also, I had a limited amount of pages. I think mine is only 5 pages long. It's one of the shorter stories. Kevin's is the other short one. And just trying to give a good drive-by. These are the ghosts that are featured in the Sorg highlight reel. That was what was tricky. I think I did a pretty good job, because instead of just being me walking around and telling you, the viewer or reader, instead I have the ghosts telling their stuff themselves and showing you. And I think that made it a much more interesting story. I also wanted to make it uplifting to the people who have put a lot of work into restoring the Sorg, and basically kind of speak through Paul Sorg, have him thank them for their work within the story. And that's how it ends, really, is he has a small little monologue that says, "Thank you for all your work. Make this place glow again." And it's very sweet. So
I really want to visit
horror story. It's a nice place to visit, and maybe someday we'll be able to do some kind of event there.
Definitely do an urban sketching event there.
Do they do anything with like their ghost stories? Do they do any like what we went to? My brain has just shut down.
Well, like Music Hall does. Yeah, Music Hall does ghost tours every year.
So
ghost tours. Thank you.
I'm not sure if they are doing that. COVID has really messed up a lot of plans, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I've never investigated it. We know that Ashley and Amanda have. The other people that I know who have are David Jones and his group, and also Paravisions. And Paravisions has a video on Vimeo that's still up that they produced, and that is the team going through and doing a very, I'm going to say it's very quick because it's only an hour long, so they edited a lot out, I am sure, but it gives a good idea of what the Sorg's layout is. It gives a good visual of what the commercial building looks like, which you don't usually see with the promotional photos, because most of the commercial building is not being used at the moment because it's still being revitalized. So that's a pretty good short documentary to watch if you want. But not a lot of people have gotten in. I know the new owners, which would be Sorg, the Sorg Opera House revitalization group. I don't think they really do so many ghost hunts or paranormal investigations there because it's still under construction. It's kind of dangerous to go through parts of it.
Yeah.
So, what technique did you do the art in? Is it all digital or?
Yeah, that was.
That's a rude question. I apologize putting it that way because really it doesn't matter what tools you did. I'm just more kind of interested in the process. You know, I mean, a lot of time my comic for the Cabinet of Curiosities is also going to be all digital, and the only reason I did it, I don't think it looks really any different than if I inked it by hand. It just is for expediency. That being said, I'm still late, but
yeah, so it's a legit question because a lot of aspiring comic artists want to know how people are creating stuff. I know it was something that I always was into when I was getting the hang of illustrating. So mine is completely done digitally via Clip Studio Paint and on my gigantic Cintiq. And I actually used a lot of my own photo references when I was there, because as you mentioned earlier in a different question, there are a lot of heavy photo like illustrations of the Sorg. And I know my weak spot is landscapes and architecture. And so I would just take the photos that I took back in 2013 and just basically trace over them. And that was to be speedy as well. So I'm not sitting there trying to get all the perspective right. So, but yeah, Clip Studio Paint. And I am a big fan of their in-house G nib brush, just to get a little bit technical. I think it has a really good flow whenever you make a stroke with the pen. And there's a bunch of custom content that you can use. A lot of the balloons that I use for the word balloons are custom content that you can buy from the Clip Studio store, and a lot of the tones as well. But other than that, it's all hand drawn digitally, if that makes sense.
It's hand drawn. I consider it hand drawn. You're still using a pen. I mean, I also use a big Cintiq, and I like Clip, but I don't use it since they have the Kyle Webster brushes. Now I pretty much just live in Photoshop, mostly because I'm doing so much stuff like that goes from Photoshop to After Effects or from Illustrator. And so I use those three programs so much that I don't use Clip that much anymore, even though I bought the most recent version of it. But it does have some really nice structured drawing tools that I like.
I like it a lot if you are building graphic novels or even short form comics. It's super easy to put together your strips for short form or your pages for long form. I use the EX version, which is, I am pretty sure, I don't want to open it because it will take a lot of.
But it's like the extended version, the more
yeah,
professional
it's the one that where you can do animations and everything in the seats and the 3D modeling. And I like that because you can export for EPUB, so you can put all your pages together and make a gigantic PDF without having to put it through a bunch of other programs to put your TIFFs into PDF format, which is very helpful. And I'm actually doing that right now for Miss Gray, which is the very, very late free comic book day comic that I will have out by Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, which is at the end of this month. So September 30th. So yeah. And I get to do all the fonts too. Also, you can do it all in Clip Studio too. So, and if you do it on an iPad, it will it will correct all your misspellings.
That's always handy.
It's
Well,
very
I-
handy.
have
that's
a
always-
question about
Oh, go on.
fonts. Like,
Mhm.
are they copyright?
Yes.
Some of them are.
So when you create digitally, you have to use some sort of font
Mm-hmm.
unless you create your own, right? So how do
Mhm.
do you
Well,
either purchase
most-
one or
Most
I
of the packages, you buy them. Most
Yeah.
Okay.
packages come with fonts. Like Adobe has a huge amount of fonts that you're able to use, but where it really becomes an issue is, and I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was NBC, one of the big 3 networks, actually had to pay a ton of money because they had not licensed their fonts properly.
Mhm.
It's when you start
Mhm.
getting into mass production of stuff that you really have to keep an eye on the fonts. All the fonts I pretty much have bought. There's a lot of, for comic book artists, Lambot has a lot of great fonts that you can buy. And you notice like it's cheaper if you're like an indie artist, but if you are like Marvel and DC or one of the big companies, you pay more for your fonts because they are technically artwork created by another artist. And for
Mhm.
those that follow Twitter just did an entire font change and just developed their own font so that they wouldn't have to pay font royalties.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I use Blambot. As Christina mentioned, they have a bunch of different tiers and you can pay different license fees for different ones. So some of them are free. You can go
Okay.
there as long as you are making a free comic and it's not for mass commercial use. It could be
Mhm.
free. And then it goes up from there. So some of like actually the logo font for Witches and Sorcerers is a Blambot font that I have paid the logo copyright licenses for so that I can use it without repercussions later. And it's
And
the
that's
same.
good forever and ever and ever. You just pay for it
As
once.
far as I know, I paid for it once and I can use it until I feel like using a different font. For my comics, I use the Euro font, which is also found on Blambot. And I believe I also paid for that. And also, for those who want to know a great deal, on New Year's Day, every year, Blambot puts all their fonts for sale and the price is the year. So for 2020, everything was $20.20. And then
Nice.
2021, $20.21.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you
Oh my
occasionally
gosh,
hear
that's
there
amazing.
was and I can't remember the name of the animated film that had won all these awards, and one of the things that kept it from being generally released and streamed was that when they had it on the festival circuit, they paid one fee for the music that was used in it, and they had to settle it up before it was in wide release because the they had to pay more money to the, and as they should be. I mean, you should get paid, additional when something goes and makes that. I don't know how much money an animated film, but if it's being released like at AMC theaters, the people that are involved that did the music should be compensated more.
Agreed.
There are
Yeah.
many people that probably feel that, and there's been a lot of articles lately, dipping back into the comics thing, saying how little comic book artists that work for, and writers that work for, Marvel and DC, how little they're
Mhm.
compensated considering how much these companies make in revenue, for the billions
I've heard
that they
heard
make.
the same for costumers that
Yeah.
make the costumes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of the creatives don't get paid enough.
It was
Yeah.
interesting.
Or even credit. Sometimes
Yeah.
they don't get credit.
Yeah,
Well,
the
like think
co-creator of
about
Batman.
Kirby
Mhm,
versus
mhm.
Lee with the early
Mhm.
Marvel movies, and it was Stanley because he was producing. He was the
Mhm.
producer of these,
Mhm.
and then people are like, "What about Jack Kirby or Ditko or any of these other people that partnered and
Yeah.
created these?" So now I can't remember which one.
Well,
which
Batman,
one
the
it was.
co-creator.
Oh, the Suicide Squad.
Oh,
If you
interesting.
look at the credits for the new Suicide Squad, not the
Mhm.
sucky one that came out a few years ago, um, that's not a hot take. That's a generally accepted thing. They have a huge creator thank, and it's every single creator of all the different characters.
Oh wow.
And it gets really into quite detailed. That thinking all the different creators of, because they used so many characters in that movie.
They did. They really
Yeah.
did.
And I think that it's a good discussion because you have people living off of the creative talents of these people and making a ton of money. And, these families are in poverty sometimes.
Yeah.
Speaking of the co-creator of Batman, who's finally getting his name on everything, because they used to only put Gil Kane's name on. And now, what's his first name? His last name's Finger. And I'll look it up really quick.
I don't know.
But anyway, I was
Yeah.
at a book festival in Indiana. It wasn't a book festival, it was like a literary kind of weekend that they had at this university. They invited me. One of the other speakers was credited for getting Finger's name on all the intellectual property, and he invented the Joker and wrote a lot of the early stories when Batman first came out, and he died in relative poverty. But now I think his granddaughter, I'll put a link so that people can get the correct facts, since I'm just talking off the top of my head. I think that she's finally getting some money from the franchise, which
From
is
DC.
good. But obviously,
And Warner Brothers.
yeah, but obviously, the guy, I want to say he died in the 70s, or it was a long time ago that he passed away. But it's, and it was very typical that people that came up with this sort of thing, I mean, you hear of them throwing away comics that people drew, like the original art. They just used to throw it in dumpsters.
Well, the BBC erased a lot of the original Doctor Who.
Yeah, I would love to see some of the old comedy shows that Peter Cook did with Dudley Moore. Those were all erased.
Yeah.
Well, it's easier to just get rid of it than having to pay to upkeep it or to keep it, because eventually you need a huge building to store things. When the Enquirer closed their press, my friend Jeff Cease and I went over to the press to grab all the negatives that they had stored there, because they ran out of room in the library, and they still don't have room for them. And I know one year they didn't have anywhere to keep them. And they're like, nobody cares. I'm like,
but
yes,
people
they
do care.
do.
I mean, warehousing is a huge issue, and keeping track of stuff like that. I mean, that has always been a big part of quote history too, is who archives. I mean, that's one reason Western history is taught the way it is because for a long time, one of the biggest archivists of history was the church, and they loved Greek and Roman history. So we have piles and piles of Greek and Roman history, but they weren't so interested in some of the other, early tribes in Europe and stuff. So you don't really know so much about them.
Or anything that makes them look bad.
Looking at the Mayan calendar and the codex that were all burnt. So now we can't really transcribe them too well.
Exactly. Like, if somebody doesn't save this stuff, it can be lost to history so easily.
Well, I tried. When I was in the newsroom, I scanned, I don't know how many thousands of photos, and it didn't even put a dent in it. But I know at least the stuff that I did, they have been able to use readily for content, and it's just cool. I mean, you get burned out scanning individual photos one by one eventually, but I really wish I could have had more time just to sit and go through.
Well, you think about it, it's almost like it's your collective memory that you're losing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, some of it is pretty boring. I mean, there's a lot of headshots of people. But things like our King's Island folder was pretty cool. I know I've mentioned the suicide folder before. I don't know. It's just kind of neat. I don't know. Yeah. I guess I could, I mean, I still work there. I could go in there and just sit in the library and go through things, but
I'm sure there is so much stuff just about different historical things that have happened that, you think about how many photos you only keep like 2 or 3 of, but sometimes it might be useful to look at old pictures.
I would love to see old photos of the Sorg.
Yes.
Especially its opening day.
I will see if we can't find anything. If I can't find anything,
Yeah.
Also, we have pretty much every single flippant photo of Pete Rose we ever took.
Okay, so I wouldn't be
Sorry.
so sad if they lost a couple of those negatives, but
I got so many. There are so many.
How many
And I've
pictures?
scanned in a ton.
Should we talk about the hometown haunt?
Yes,
Yes,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
we should. This has been
This
our
is the tangents, the episode.
yes,
That's
yes.
what this
Well,
is.
this is our anniversary episode, so we're
Yeah.
kind of chatting, and we haven't. This is like one of our first episodes without a guest that we've done in a while.
In
too,
a
so-
while, yeah.
Yeah, so we're just kind of catching up. So
So, how many other ghosts did you see while you were at the Sorg?
So it was only the one, but I
Okay.
felt the presence of quite a few.
Okay.
So that's why I'm really interested in being able to go again to
yeah,
see
I would love to go.
to see who I can meet, basically,
Yeah.
and what information we can glean. I think it would be fun to meet Paul Sorg.
Mhm.
And he dresses up to the nines. He's in his 3-piece suit with the pushed up collar and everything, and his big
Oh,
old
fun.
mustache.
Mhm.
So
He just doesn't want to let go of his earthly.
he's very proud of it. I won't say let
Yeah.
go, because he and his son let go of it in the 1920s.
Mhm.
But he's very proud of basically the legacy he built, is the
Mhm.
impression that I got. He worked really hard. He was the son of immigrants, moved across the country, and built up basically from zero, from scratch, right after the Civil War. This huge, I'm not a fan of tobacco, but it's a popular product, especially then. And he built up this mass fortune from it. And he
Mhm.
tried to give back to his community, which how many multimillionaires can you say actually tried to do that in their hometowns?
Well, I feel like I've lived so close to Middletown for most of my life in Dayton and in Cincinnati, and I cannot even ever remember going there for anything.
I don't think I've ever been there.
I guess
either.
it is called Middletown, and that's sort of like explains it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Middletown.
Yeah, no,
it
it's
and
between
Hamilton.
it's
are
a town between towns.
It is, but it has an interesting history, especially Hamilton and Middletown's prohibition history, which has largely been hidden because
Mhm.
it hasn't been quite, no one wants to really support the fact that heavy drinking and prostitution happened. But that's really the entire Cincinnati area. That's what we're kind of known
Newport,
for. We're
Cincinnati,
known for
yeah.
pork and booze. And we really have to just accept
Hey, that's just
this.
like a Reese's
Oh.
peanut butter cup. Two tastes that taste good together: bacon and booze.
Bourbon and bacon, it goes really well together.
Well,
I
and
know.
not to mention Newport was the test run for Vegas
Yes.
and the mob.
Yes. And its
So,
next stop was Hamilton.
you're welcome, Vegas.
You got the Purple Gang, you got John Dillinger. They were hot down here. And then
Mhm.
not too far away, we have the questionably named French Lick, Indiana. So we got a lot of stuff going down here that we could run. We can give Chicago a good run for its money with our gangsters down here. This is where all they would vacation when they were too hot.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
So to the
it's
hometown
super
haunt.
visit.
Yeah. Should I
Who
go
wants to
ahead
read
and
it?
read it?
Sure.
A friend of mine sent me this when we were talking about the Sorg. I think you were talking about doing your comic on it and how you'd been there. And so she sent me this experience that she had. And the interesting thing about it, well, let me read it and then we can talk about it. She says, I went to a friend's fundraiser a number of years ago for a group that was raising monies to continue restoration work for the Sorg. The fundraising event had outdoor music, food trucks, and was offering limited tours of the Sorg. Anyway, we went into the Sorg to hear my friend do a presentation. I didn't make it more than 20 feet in before I started feeling like I was going to freak out if I stayed inside. It was like I had hit an invisible wall. I started getting real dizzy and had a bad feeling about the place. I essentially ran out and stayed outside. I had never heard of the Sorg before and had no preconceived ideas. I had only gotten that type of feeling a few other times, including at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. You know, this reminds me of the feeling you said you felt when we were in that barn, where she said she had a bad feeling about the place and felt like she hit an invisible wall. Elaborate on that, Kat, on what she was probably feeling.
Well, I don't know if she is a medium, is basically who would pick up on those kinds of things. Psychics would pick
She
up on
probably
like
didn't think that she was, but maybe she's sensitive and
a
doesn't
lot of
realize it.
people could have been just random, just empathetic to, not to sound too woohoo here, but the vibes that were being given off by the dead. So what happens a lot of times if you just accidentally run into a hot spot and you're sensitive to the vibes being given off is that you will kind of get overpowered and or overwhelmed, kind of like overwhelmed by the vapors, and you just kind of need to leave because your your senses just kind of go into overdrive and it starts panicking and you just flee. And I think that maybe from what she's describing is what happened. And I know if you there's people who can, sorry, I know you can take basically lessons from other psychic mediums on how to control that reaction. So that's why myself and Ashley are able to walk into these places and we feel it and we feel nauseous. That's when a lot of mediums or psychics will feel nauseous when they're around something with a lot of activity. I ran into a similar situation actually at Mansfield Reformatory with my friend Heather. The first time we ever visited, we tried to walk into the toilet room. It sounds like a strange name, but the toilet room is just a storage room for a whole bunch of porcelain toilets that are not being used. And I think it's in the former, oh man, I wrote a book about this. I should remember which room this was. I believe it was the former um, libraries on the second floor. It would have been the hospital, I think. But now it's the toilet room. And we tried to walk in, and we immediately got overwhelmed by basically spirit activity. And the two of us just turned around and were like, we'll visit it later. Bye bye. And that I know exactly how your friend felt because I've run into that. And that's what experience it helps with that, basically.
Have you ever walked out of some place just because it was too intense?
Well, Mansfield Reformatory, but we eventually came back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
but I didn't know if that happened a lot or
it not really, because I eventually realized that it's just a sense of there's a lot of activity, and when you do run into it, that means you're going to start getting activity on your investigation. So generally, as an investigator, that's what you want to be running into because that's easier to collect data on. Because then you can be like, okay, this feels really oppressive. I am getting nauseous. And with whatever team I'm working on with, I go, okay, I'm feeling nauseous. Now it's time to put down the REM pods. It's time to put down the Gaussian meter. It's time to put down your audio recording equipment so that we may get a peak in activity in this particular area. So as an investigator, it's a good thing. If you're just the average Joe and you're walking through and you suddenly feel nauseous and overwhelmed, it's scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like, when you hear it described as the sixth sense, it almost seems analogous to when you walk into a room that has really strong smells.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is.
Where it might not even be bad smells, but it's overwhelming your senses. And so it's almost like whatever this sensory organ is overwhelmed by whatever it's taking in.
Yeah, like your psychic eye. Was it the third eye? There's a lot of ways to interpret it. But yeah, your senses feel overwhelmed, especially your flight or fight sense. And most people will fly away. They will flee.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good story. And definitely that part of the mezzanine. Was it the mezzanine floor? I think no, she was on the orchestra floor. If she had been one level up, I believe that actually would have been the haunted bathroom, which is definitely what people have felt using that area, like walking around those stairs. Where she describes where she's at is the end of the checkered hallway, which is the main hallway into the orchestra level. And it kind of has a little bit of a funhouse effect because there's really high ceilings and it has a checkerboard marble floor. And then it has really it's really tight, and I always feel slightly claustrophobic walking down it, or I remember feeling slightly claustrophobic. Just talked like I've been there multiple times. I felt claustrophobic while walking down it, and then you walk into this massive orchestra level with the mezzanine balconies right over your head, and then it's just a sea of chairs, and at the very end is the stage. And of course, the stage to its left has the ghost light on, and that's always on when the stage is not in use. And it's just a spooky little lamp that theaters will put on.
I can't wait to see it in person.
Yeah, they've done a lot
really
of
neat.
remarkable work. I hope we can do something there someday and investigate all of the building, not just the auditorium, but also the commercial building, because there's a lot of life in that commercial building. That's where you had dentist's office and doctor's offices and lawyers and other businessmen. I know in Hamilton, a similar building had the music teacher had a studio there, and kids could take music lessons there.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we can end the episode.
Yeah. So, everyone, as I scroll up here really quickly, everyone, thank you for joining us for another wonderful 1-year anniversary episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. After a year, you would think I'd get that right. You can follow us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and of course, we love to hear your hometown haunted mail, and you can email that to us at hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. I'm Kat Klockow for Christina and Jen. Good night and stay weird.